Right, I'll start. So last night, I guess the end was where I just told the John that they'd taken 75% of my stomach away, which of course they hadn't. Although he thought I was going to be a really cheap date for the rest of his life, I guess. Um, I spent 3 nights in the high dependency unit with all those bloody machines hooked up. But after the first night, they expect you to get out of bed and sit in a chair or move. And I couldn't even comprehend getting out of the chair. And you have this one-to-one nurse that's trying to like coach you to do things. Um, and while she was lovely, and she's only doing a job, I really didn't want to get out. So she let me off in the morning, and then in the afternoon she was like, "No, we'll use that." And I was like, "Use what?" She was like, "That hoist." Well, you only see like 30 stone women being hoisted about on telly, don't you? And I was like, "Not getting in that." She was like, "Yeah, you are." And they did. Another nurse came in and they put me in this contraption that hoisted me out of the bed, up across the ceiling, and then into the chair at the other side of the bed, like I was some big fat whale. Um, so that wasn't pleasant because it was agony. Being just moving was agony. Um, and I laugh about it now because I think of myself being hoisted across that room. But it was like she was like torturing me. Um, but obviously for my own good. And then they did that every day, but they make you do it like in the morning, and then they'll move make you get back. Um, Obviously, I didn't go in the hoist again after that. I was adamant it's okay. I'll struggle to my chair. Um, but I, it's like you feel like your scar's just going to split open and all your insides are going to fall out, which obviously they won't. I know that, but um, the way you move and the pain that you're in, that's what it feels like. Um, and of course, John could only be there um, once he'd sorted the kids out, and then he'd have to leave again to go and pick them up and sort them out at night, which was fine. He stayed as much as he could. And Michelle was coming backwards and forwards with Simon from Liverpool to help out, even though they had the girls. So that wasn't ideal, but I don't know what we'd have done without them. We'd have been lost without them. Um, and then after after being in there with all those machines and stuff, I couldn't wait to get onto a normal ward. It was absolutely boiling in there. I don't know why they need the heating on so high. Because of course, if you get cold, just shove a blanket on. But it was ridiculous. And then I got this stupid heat rash because the beds have got them stupid plastic. I don't know, they have them for a reason. Plastic sheets on, haven't they, which just make you sweat the minging. Um, I got a heat rash, so like I told the nurse, and she came and gave me um, Piriton, and then within no time I could feel like my tongue going all tingly and like my throat closing. Well, I've had Piriton before, and that's never happened. Um, so I was like buzzing for her to come back because I was like I can't breathe. Um, and she went to get a doctor, and they thought I was having an anaphylactic shock to the Piriton, but not because it was Piriton, but because I was on so many other medications. Um, so they went and got something else and gave it to me, and it started to take that horrible swelling feeling, tingling feeling away, and calm me down. But that was awful. Um, so obviously they were worried about that. Um, and then they've got me stable and I was all right and I felt all right, I was moved to a high dependency ward, which going from a little single room on your own with all your machines, um, I went to this mixed ward with 6 beds in, where there was only me and one other woman, everybody else was male. Um, all obviously we needed one like a lot of care. There were a lot of nurses just for the 6 of us. And I was still there with all my things stuck in my neck and in my wrists and stuff, and my tube down my nose. That was probably the worst, one of the worst bits of it, because I don't know if you've ever had a, I nearly said if you've ever had something down your throat, but if you've ever had a tube down your nose, in like back of your throat into your stomach, you can feel it all the way at the back of your throat. So like even if you go like that with your nose, it wobbles it in the back of your throat. Oh, it's disgusting. Um, and then of course, every few hours they'd come to aspirate it with a syringe and take all the gunk out of your stomach. And that wasn't pleasant either. It was like the bottom of a dirty pond. It was disgusting. Um, but the other people in there, the ones that could speak, like the guy next to me was quite nice. We were chatting, and the guy opposite, he was quite nice. The guy next to me had like a really major operation. Not that mine wasn't, but I can't remember what it was for, but a really major operation, and he had a tube into his side as well to drain fluid away. Oh, the screams he gave when that came out, and I was just thankful that I hadn't had anything like that. Because when they take the one out of your nose, they just tell you to breathe in, and they just pull it out dead quick, and then you breathe out while it's coming out. Oh, it's disgusting. Um, but that was quite an experience being in there. And then only once they'd taken that tube out, could I move to a normal ward. And I went to the ladies only ward then, and it was just a little side 4 bed ward. Um, and there were 3 other ladies in there. An older lady was across the way, and she'd had to have part of her bowel removed because it had become obstructed. She was quite poorly when I first went in, but she went home before I did, which was great. Um, the girl next to me, she was only in her 20s, and she was on a third lot of breast cancer, excuse me, and she was in for reconstruction. So she'd had the first lot at 18, and she'd had a double mastectomy over the years, and then she was in for a last reconstruction, which we shouldn't laugh, but it was quite funny because she was a lovely girl, and she'd come in to have her nipples put back on, or some sort of nipple put on. Um, and when she'd had them done and she was ready to go home, she was there, like this with a top up, saying, "What do you think? Do they think they look good?" And all of us were all like, "Oh yeah, they're great," just things that you wouldn't dream that you'd be doing. And then the lady opposite me, she'd had a double mastectomy as well, but because she had the BCRA gene, so her and her sister had had to have double mastectomies, and she'd been in previously before they put implants in, and I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but this is the process she'd had to go through before they could put the implant in for her. They put like a balloon in, and then they, over a period of time, they blow the balloons up to make your skin stretch to the size, I guess, of what they're going to put the implant in. And she had that done, and it was sad really because she was quite disappointed. She'd bought, because it was coming up to the summer, she'd bought a nice dress for over the summer, and when they took her bandages off and stuff, obviously she was still really swollen, um but they weren't she didn't have a cleavage like she thought she was going to have. She was still fair, she was flatter than she'd hoped she was going to be, but I guess when the swelling everywhere else had gone down, that might have changed. But even by the time she went out, she wasn't particularly happy with them. um but that, we were in that little unit for most of the time I was in there. In fact, the lady in the corner who went home, she had to come back in again, for a few days because she'd got an infection. So they brought her back in, and she was in the same ward, bless her. Um, but it was nice because everybody, you're not all going through the same thing, but you're going through a similar experience. Um, and there were other ladies, bobbing about that were on like different bits of the side ward, who'd come in and were having lymph nodes removed and they had various different stages of where they were up to in their process. Um, and it's quite interesting, really, hearing everybody else's experience. Um, and only the girl who'd come in for her reconstruction, she was the only lady on that ward that was younger than me, because she was only, I think she was 20, either 26 or 28. And of course, I was 34 by the time I'd gone in for my op. So um, it's sad, really, seeing what everybody's there for, but you're sort of united when you're all talking and sharing your stories. So it's nice in a weird way. Um, John came every day. Um, Once Luke had gone to school, and either Michelle had come, or Pauline was having Liv, or Christina would have Liv, or whoever was having Olivia for us. Marie and Terry had her. She was a bit like pass the parcel, but that was the way it had to be. So whoever was having her, once they'd come, he would come to the hospital, because he was allowed to spend whatever time he wanted there. There were a few days where he did bring Liv, um, but I didn't really want her coming in. I still had all my wires and stuff attached to me, so I didn't really want her coming in, because she either could have pulled them out, and I didn't really want to sit in there in that environment. Um, so he tended to leave her at home and then come himself. Um, and Luke, he didn't really want to come, but I spoke to him most days. And when I'd had my lines out of my wrists, I thought, oh, he'll be fine, because that were in my neck here, they had like a massive plaster over, so you couldn't pull them out anyway. So I just sort of like put my hair over them I knew he was coming in. John's mum and dad brought him, but as soon, like, he was fine when he first came in, and then as soon as he saw that, he ran off, and John's dad had to go after him, and he wouldn't come back. So I just rung him and said, look, it's fine, I'm okay. They're only there to monitor certain things, and it's nothing bad. And I just said, look, if you don't want to come again, you don't have to come again, because I plan on coming home as soon as I can. And I just told him that I loved him, not to worry. And then John's mum and dad had to take him home, but that was like heartbreaking, because I thought he'd be okay, because he couldn't really see anything. Um, but people have told me since that I probably didn't look my best either, which wouldn't have helped, coupled with these things sticking out of my neck. But I just wanted to see him. I'd missed him. Um, but and then because that had happened, I mithered the consultant, Mr. Wilson or Mr. Renahan, whoever was coming round to see me. I just mithered them to say, can I please go home? I just want to go home. But they'd said initially I would be in for 3 weeks. And this was like, I don't know, maybe day 8. And I was like, please, I won't do anything. John won't let me do anything. Please, I just want to go home. And they were like, no, no, no. And I was like, I promise I won't do anything. And every time they came, morning and afternoon, I'd ask, can I go home yet? And they started to consider, because I was quite upbeat once I'd had it. They started to consider letting me go. But obviously I was in a lot of pain still, so I needed to see a pain nurse, and then I also needed to see a physio about how and when I could start to move about, because at that time I was still on complete bed rest, with a lovely catheter in, which I've got a funny story about that, which I haven't put in the book, I don't think, but yeah, it was quite funny. Um, so they arranged for the pain nurse to come and the physio to come and talk me through the process and what painkillers I'd need and how, like, when to take what. And then they gave me, it's called a cough cushion. So it's like a square cushion that they provide, that essentially is what it says it is. And every time you cough or need to move, you have to push the cough cushion on. That's a hard thing to say. put the cushion on your stomach to stop your scar from tearing, which is a bit weird. Um, so that became my best friend because you don't realise how much your abdomen does for your body, I guess. So yeah, that was bizarre. But they eventually they let me go. So I was in after them saying 3 weeks. I was in for 11 nights before they let me go home, which was longer than I wanted, but shorter than I should have been, I guess. But it was nice just to get home and be in my own bed or on my own sofa with the kids doing whatever the kids could do. Um, and they were quite happy that the prognosis after my operation was good. And whilst they didn't take everything that they had planned to take because they'd wash them, so like my ovaries and my uterus, because the gynecologist had said if you could leave them, leave them, they washed them. What they washed them with, I don't know, but they did. They washed them. Um, so I was a bit concerned that they'd left them behind. But Mr. Wilson had just said, dead matter of factly, well, it's okay because if it comes back, we'll just bring you back in. And I thought, nearly literally over my dead body, will you bring me back in? Because it was horrendous. So I was like, I don't think so. But I guess if it had come back, I'd have had to go back in, wouldn't I? And then I guess once I got home, they told me that I couldn't pick Olivia up and I couldn't do anything other than maybe a short walk or anything. Not no like running up the stairs or anything like that for 3 months. So for 3 months I couldn't pick Liv up. So work had given John 10 weeks off. They were amazing, really. Work 10 weeks off on full pay to look after me. And he spent most of his time there looking after me and Liv, running Luke about. Christina came a lot. Michelle and Simon came a lot. The girls came when they weren't at school. There was always somebody there to look after me. But I remember this one day, and I probably hadn't been home very many days, and she was sat on the rug in the back room, and she was playing away, and then she started crying, and I couldn't get up to go to her, and that I was just like, I can't remember who was even in the house, who was looking after me at the time, but I just had to shout somebody to come and get her because they'd said to me I couldn't get it, and I physically couldn't have got off the sofa to pick her up because I was in that much pain. So I just had to shout for somebody to come, which is a mum of a young baby. You don't want to be going through anything like that. But of course, she didn't know any different, so she was fine. And then I had a few setbacks. I was sick quite a lot when my cough cushion helped because, of course, when you're retching, it's like your abdomen. So yeah, my cough cushion was my best friend. And then I couldn't. I was getting out of breath a lot and I couldn't breathe. I was struggling to breathe. And when I rung the hospital, they were concerned that I could have got a clot in my lungs because I'd come out of hospital so soon. And obviously, I took them horrible stocking things off when I got home. So I had to go back for a scan, but thankfully, it was nothing. They just thought maybe I'd done too much and I needed to rest. So they just told me to rest, which obviously I did. And then because I'd had the reaction to Piriton when I was in HDU, they referred me for some tests with Insure. But because I was on so many other different drugs at the time, they had to do a test for each one separately each week. So I went on a Monday, every Monday afternoon for months while they tested. I think there were 14 different drugs that I'd been on while I was in HDU, and they had to test all of them to see what it was that they thought had caused the reaction. So I'd go at like 1 o'clock. Some days I'd be out for like 4. Some days I could be there till 8, 9 o'clock at night while they were doing like skin pricks and all different tests. And on one occasion, they did this. Whatever, I can't even remember what it was they'd used. And I got like a pinwheel here on my neck. So they had to photograph it and everything, and then they take it away and say whether they think it's like a serious reaction or a not so serious reaction. And whilst it was obviously a reaction, they said it wasn't anything to be overly concerned about. And it was the Piriton. And if I needed to take anything like that in the future, just to take cetirizine, because it does the same thing, but doesn't have all the ingredients in the Piriton has, apparently. I mean, I obviously wouldn't know. And then I was still going back to Christie's every few weeks to start with, just for them to check. Obviously, my scar and everything, I felt all right and stuff. So I'd either see Mr. Renahan or Mr. Wilson, and they just, I don't know, just checked everything. And I just asked them, and I'd had the problem as soon as I'd had my operation, and I asked the nurse on the ward, I couldn't eat anything without it going straight through me, and anyone who knows me well knows what that's like. So I just asked if it could be related to the op, and they were like, no, I don't, they didn't think so. It's not something that they'd had experience of before with other people. So they referred me to somebody with Insure again that Mr. Wilson knew, and I'm still under their care to this day. And I have to take tablets now when I eat, that's supposed to help with reducing that risk. But at the time, I couldn't eat a piece of toast without needing to run to the loo, or I'd be eating a meal and I'd have to go to the toilet before I'd even finish the meal. And I've had a few close calls, but I won't go into them on here. But anyone who knows me well knows what those close calls are. Um, and those tablets now I will take forever, because whatever it is that's wrong, um, they can't. There's nothing that can actually fix it. So the tablets are just like to help it along, I guess, and stop that happening as often as it did. Um, the worst experience I ever had, and she'll probably never forget it, is I went away on a pamper weekend with John's mum and his sister, and me and his sister Natalie were sharing, and we'd gone to bed. We'd been for Pampers, been to the bar and had a meal and stuff, and then we'd gone to bed, and my stomach started, and I just thought, oh my god. And she, like, there was 2 double beds in the room, and the toilet was here while I was over here. So every time I needed to go, I had to walk past their bed. 26 times in one night I had to go to the toilet. So obviously I didn't get much sleep, and I was disturbing her all the time. But that's the worst it's ever been. And I did say to her, "You'll never share with me again, will you?" I'm not that bad now. I'm not great, but I'm not that bad. Um, but my doctor, when I chat to her about it, she says to me, "But you have to remember what your body's been through, and your body will never be the same again, and probably only functions at 70% of what it was before." And I do forget that, because I still try to do all the things that I did before, and eat all the things that I did before. And I know that there are triggers that make it worse, or make it happen quicker. But I want to live my life. So if I need to run to the toilet 3 minutes after I've had a McDonald's, then I'm still going to eat that McDonald's. I just need to work out where the toilets are. So if I go anywhere, my first thing is, where's the toilets? Because if I do something, then I need to know where I'm going. I mean, there's been many occasions where I've been out shopping, and I've had to, like, literally run to the loo. Um, So that's not great. I've been on the motorway and I've had to pull into the services like Stirling Moss and run. So anybody that suffers with their bowels, I have every sympathy because I know exactly how you feel and what it's like. Um, and then I guess once I began to feel better and they were comfortable that I was better, I started to think about I just wanted to get back to normal, and I wanted to go back to work. So I guess by the time I started to think about going back to work, I was off for my 6 months maternity before I went in for my op, and then I'd gone on to sick pay, and we were very lucky that our sick pay was 6 months full pay and 6 months half pay. And by the time I went back to work, um, altogether I was off 17 months. And while 17 months seems like a really long time, and it felt like a long time at the time, and I couldn't wait to go back, I 100% think that I went back too soon. Um, Both physically, because I don't think my body was ready for it, because my job at the time, I was driving up and down the country and out on visits all the time, seeing customers. Um, but not only physically, but mentally, because I don't think I'd given myself time to process what my body had gone through and what I'd gone through and what we'd been through as a family. I think I tried to rush through every process, thinking that was the right thing to do and that was the right thing for everything to be normal. But I guess if it had taken a step back and taken me time with it, then I would have processed things better. And I I think really I should have took a lot longer off work. And I mean, work were great, and occupational health, I went back on a part-time basis and they eased me back into work. Um, and at the time when I was going back, I was saying to John, it's fine, I won't be like I was before. I'll take a step back and I'll take it easy. I won't work as many hours and I won't do as much traveling. Within no time, I was back to doing all the traveling I did before and working all the hours that I did before. Um, because if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 100%. And I loved my job. Um, and I carried on as normal, and not much had changed at work in the time that I've been off. So once I got back in, it was like putting my comfy slippers back on and just being, back to comfortable how I was before. Um, but over the years, we went through quite a few restructures at work, um, and things had changed a lot, and our positions had changed a lot. I got a promotion, and then they had another restructure, and they were changing it again. Um, and whilst there was a position there for me, um, in the north of the country, which was great, I just I just thought it felt like the right time to take redundancy, because I had the option of taking redundancy. I've been there 21 years, just over. So we talked about it, and I just said I think it's the right time now. So I went to, because my first meeting, consultation, I'd said, oh no, 100% I want to stay, and I want that position. And then the second consultation, because I'd gone away and actually took a step back and thought about it, I went into the meeting and said, no, actually, I'm going to take my redundancy. And he nearly fell off his chair. Um, and they tried a few different things to persuade me to stay. But I think once I'd made my mind up in my head that I was going, there was no way that they could change my mind. And the process was very quick. Um, and I finished a couple of months later on the 9th of December. That was 2016. Um, and started a new chapter again of my life, I guess, because I'd worked there for such a long time. It'd been such a big part of my life. I met John there, um, but it just felt like it was time for something new. So that's what I did. That's what I did. So that's the end of chapter 8. So tomorrow I'll cover chapter 9 and 10. So thank you again for joining me. I might even celebrate with a wine tomorrow, while we do 9 and 10. Because whilst it's been great doing the lives and talking about it, it's quite draining emotionally, because when I get off, I'm like, wow. Because just talking it through, and I know I'm sat in a room on my own, but talking it through with other people, if when I watch it the next day, so I've been watching them the next day, I just think, wow, if that was somebody else telling me that story, I'd be like, oh my lord. So thank you guys. I love you guys. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.